not through anything you said about them, not through the pointed observation, the well-timed revelation of their pattern to people who matter to them, the deliberate exposure of the gap between their public self-presentation and their private relational behavior. You did not engineer the embarrassment. You did not construct the visibility of the immaturity through any action directed at producing it. The embarrassment arrived through the specific, entirely non-strategic quality of simply being who you are and who you are, held in honest comparison against how the avoidant behaved, made the immaturity visible in the most undeniable way available. The contrast was the exposure, and the contrast was not performed. To understand the specific quality of this embarrassment, the quality that distinguishes it from the ordinary social embarrassment of someone who behaved badly in a specific situation and is aware of it, the nature of the avoidant's self-concept needs to be held clearly. The avoidant's identity is not built around being a person who struggles relationally. The narrative is not, I have avoidant attachment, and it affects my relationships. The narrative is something more flattering and more deeply held. The narrative of the capable, self-sufficient, emotionally intelligent adult who simply prefers independence and has a particular relationship with solitude that requires more space than the average person needs. This narrative requires, for its continued plausibility, that the avoidant's relational behavior be interpretable as reasonable, as the understandable preference of someone who knows themselves and honors their own needs, as the sophisticated self-awareness of someone who is not in relationship anxiety or defensive avoidance, but in conscious, chosen, adult independence. The narrative cannot survive honest comparison with the behavior the connection produced. The withdrawal that happened when genuine closeness reached a threshold the avoidant had not consciously set. The inconsistency that arrived in the moments when consistency was most needed. The management of the other person's caring as intimacy pressure rather than the receiving of it as the genuine gift it was. The insufficient expression of the genuine interior investment. The moments of visible, specific, emotional immaturity. The deflections, the minimizations, the retreats from accountability. The prioritizations of the avoidant's own comfort over the legitimate needs of the person they were in connection with. These behaviors are not the behaviors of the sophisticated, self-aware, consciously independent adult the narrative describes. They are the behaviors of someone whose relational functioning is governed by fear that has not been examined and patterns that have not been interrupted. They are, in the specific, developmental sense of the word, immature, not fully developed past the point of fear, governed reactivity into the adult capacity for genuine, chosen, self-aware, relational engagement. You made this visible simply by not doing the same things, by being, in the same relational context, the person who did not deflect when things were difficult, who did not create distance when genuine closeness reached a threshold, who did not manage the avoidance investment in you as a pressure to be handled, but received it as what it was, the genuine caring of a person who found you worth caring for, who expressed needs directly and without the ambiguity that deniability requires, who maintained the full, grounded, self-possessed quality of someone whose emotional functioning is not governed by the same fear in the same way. The contrast was not something you arranged. It was the natural result of two people with different levels of emotional development being in the same relational context and responding to it from those different levels. The more developed response did not make the less developed response look bad by comparison through any active effort. It simply existed, and its existence in the same context, in the same relationship, was the most direct possible illumination of the gap. The gap is what produced the embarrassment, not the knowledge that the behavior was bad. The avoidant can often acknowledge, in the intellectual layer where acknowledgement is possible without the full weight of the acknowledgement landing, that certain behaviors were not optimal. The embarrassment is deeper than the acknowledgement of not optimal behavior. It is the specific identity-level disruption of someone whose self-concept just encountered direct, concrete, undeniable evidence that the self-concept is less accurate than the self-concept has been maintaining. The gap between the narrative and the reality is the embarrassment's content. The narrative says, sophisticated, self-aware adult who chooses independence. The reality showed fear-governed relational behavior that produced specific, traceable, person-affecting costs. The narrative says, capable of genuine connection simply with particular needs. The reality showed the management of genuine connection rather than its reception, the prevention of genuine meeting rather than its provision. The gap was always there. The avoidant knew, at some level, that the narrative was a more flattering version of the reality than the reality itself warranted. But the knowing was manageable as long as the gap remained in the interior, unmeasured, without the specific, external, human evidence that genuine comparison requires. You were the comparison. Your maturity was the measurement. And the measurement, arriving not as an accusation, but as simply the observable fact of how you engaged with the same relational context that the avoidant engaged with so differently. The measurement was too specific and too honest to be managed back into the narrative's comfort. The embarrassment is specifically acute in the avoidance interior for reasons that the external presentation will not reflect. The external presentation, the composure, the maintained self-sufficiency, the specific quality of someone who is not visibly bothered, is the management system doing what it does when significant interior events require containment. But the interior event is significant. More significant in the specific, identity-threatening way than most of the interior events the management system contains. Because most of the interior events the management system contains are relational, the grief of a loss, the regret of a specific choice, the specific weight of a particular absence. These are painful, but they do not reach the identity level. They are about what happened, not about who the avoidant is. The embarrassment from the immaturity's visibility is about who the avoidant is. Or more precisely, about the gap between who the avoidant has been presenting themselves as being and who the specific, concrete, contrast-illuminated evidence of the connection revealed them to actually be. This is the identity-level disruption, and identity-level disruptions do not have the same management toolkit available that relational-level disruptions have. The narrative, which is the identity's most powerful self-protective tool, is the thing the embarrassment is disrupting. Using the narrative to manage the disruption is using the injured tool to manage the injury. The management is effortful. The containing of the embarrassment against the specific internal evidence of the gap costs more than the management usually costs. And the cost shows in the specific, telltale ways that the hidden suffering pieces have examined in the increased expense of maintaining the composed exterior against the interior's honest reckoning with what the comparison revealed. There is something important that this embarrassment can produce that most of the avoidance other significant interior events do not reliably produce. Because the embarrassment is identity level, it presses against the identity's structure in a way that relational level events do not. It requires not just the processing of a loss or the accommodation of a regret, but the examination of the self-concept itself. The asking of the question that the self-concept's comfortable maintenance has been preventing from being asked with genuine urgency. Who am I actually being in relationship? Not who do I present as being, not who I understand myself to be in the intellectual narrative layer, but who does the specific, concrete, comparison-illuminated evidence of my actual relational behavior reveal me to actually be? This question, asked genuinely, forced into genuine urgency by the embarrassment that the contrast with your maturity produced, is the beginning of the only internal process that can address the actual source of the immaturity rather than its symptoms, not the processing of a specific loss, the examination of the developmental gap that the loss revealed, the honest confrontation with the specific ways in which the fear has been governing the relational behavior that the adult, self-aware, genuinely sophisticated person the narrative describes would not be governed by. The embarrassment is not comfortable. The avoidant is not grateful for it. The management is working against its full impact with the full capacity of a system that is highly motivated to prevent the identity level disruption from producing the identity level examination. But the embarrassment is also, in the specific cases where the examination follows, the most productive interior event the avoidance relational history has yet produced, not because you intended it, because the maturity you simply are happened to be the most honest mirror the avoidance relational self-concept has ever been placed in front of. And mirrors, honest ones, held at exactly the right angle, not by design, but by the simple, unmovable, entirely genuine fact of your presence, are difficult to look away from, even when what they show is not what the story you have been telling yourself about yourself was claiming was there.